All right, so finding a missing side, number one. You're always going to have, when you're finding a missing side in this class, you'll have your right triangle. You'll have a missing side identified with a question mark or variable. You'll be given one angle and one other side. So first thing you want to do is you're just going to make sure you go ahead and identify your angle. So we're going to use angle 28. And you have to identify what positions the two sides are. So I recognize the 19 as the hypo. That's hopefully your easiest side to identify because it's right across from the right angle. And to find the opposite, we always draw a straight line out of our angle, out of the middle of our angle. So that is the opposite. So I have an opposite and a hypo. So yesterday's foundation video, our trig ratios, it was important because right now we should know or be getting there that what we need to use on our calculator is the sine button, because sine is opposite over hypo. So let me show you, I got the work already done here. Let me show you what the equation looks like. Okay, so it's not a very big equation. It's really not hard to do as long as your calculator is working correctly. So let me show you how we set this up. You will put your ratio that we need to use, and this is sine. Your angle goes directly after it. Your equals, and then you'll have a fraction bar or a fraction. So because I use sine, we will use opposite over hypo. Because if you look at your table that you should have drawn, this table back here, if you look at sine, opposite has to be on top of hypo. And that's why our x is on top of the 19, because x is in the opposite position and hypo is in the hypo, the 19 is in the hypo position. All right, so that is how you set it up. Ooh, got a lot of stuff back there. So what do we do now? So in your calculator, we have to put in sine 28. Now, if you look at my screen, I put in sine 28. I'm not sure if you can see all that, but you're going to get a huge decimal. Now, if you're on a calculator on your phone, you'll hit 28 and then sine second. So what you should see on your calculator is about 0.469 and a bunch of numbers after, but really all I use is the first three numbers, and I don't round. I just use the first three numbers. So let me go ahead and show you how to do this. I don't know if you can see it very well. So 0.469 is what I use. So I put this in my calculator, and out comes 0.469 equals x over 19. So there is my equation now, and we're almost done. Trig, the solving process is actually easy. Setting it up is what's very important. As long as you set it up correctly, you're going to be just fine. This says x divided by 19 equals 0.469. So you ask yourself, or the objective is to get x by itself. If x is being divided by 19, what's the opposite of divide by 19? The opposite is multiply 19. So in my calculator, I'm just going to take 0.469 times 19, and we will be finished. So my answer is right around 8.9. And trig, when we're doing these problems, I would say 9 out of 10 times it's going to be a decimal. All right, number 2, start the process. I always just put a little arc in this angle just so I know that I'm working with that angle. Okay, so if you look at the pieces that are given, notice the hypo is blank. So I'm not using a hypo. And the hypo is blank. To identify the pieces that are provided, well, x is in our opposite spot. So I'm going to put a OP up here. This down here is the hypo because it's across from the 90. So if this is the hypo, this is the opposite, this has to be adjacent. Now, I have to identify which ratio is opposite and adjacent, and that's cosine. So now I'm going to use the button with the COS, cos, on it when I do this math. So here is our equation. Oh, sorry, this is tan. What am I thinking? Whew, man, it's early. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. Yeah, cosine has the hypo in it. We don't have the hypo. This is tangent. Tangent, okay. Tangent, our angle, put our equal sign in, and tangent says opposite over adjacent. That's why our x is on top, because x is in the opposite spot and 32 is in the adjacent spot. Now, how do you solve this one? How do I solve this equation? Is x is divided by 32. So I am going to multiply 32 to both sides. Now this is what this looks like. So I multiply 32 over here, and those cancel out. There's my x that remains on the right-hand side. And tan 41, I just put a 32 out here because I do it to both sides, and there is what you should see right here. So in your calculator, whatever calculator you have to get it to say 27.8. If you're using your phone, you'll put 41. You'll hit the tan button. You'll see a big, long, nasty decimal. Then you'll hit times 32 and hit equals. And you should get 27.8. All right, so here is a different looking equation for finding missing sides. And as soon as I show you what the equation looks like, I'll explain it. All right, my process is identify my angle. Identify what sides you have based on that angle. Well, here's the easy part. There's your hypo. I think the opposite can be found pretty easy if you imagine like a straight line straight out the middle of that angle. That's opposite. Okay, opposite and hypo is sine. But watch what happens when you see this equation. This says sine. I select sine based on opposite and hypo. Put your angle in. And look at our fraction. This is the first time you've seen a variable on the bottom. Okay? First time this has happened. And I'm going to teach you a little trick. When the x is on the bottom, I kind of call this the little switcheroo. Okay? I'm going to call this the switcheroo. Here's what I want you to do. Now remember, the x is on the bottom only because sine says hypo has to be on the bottom, and the x is in the hypo spot. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to take your x, put it on this side of the equal sign. So here's what my x is going to look, here's what my equation is going to look like. Then put sine 33 underneath the fraction. It's a little shortcut. The 15 on top of the fraction bar does not change. So this is what our equation will look like. And this makes our process a lot easier and shorter. So now the math is a division problem. 15 divided by sine 33. So I'm going to get my calculator ready. 15 divided by sine 33, and I should get 27.54. Let me make sure that worked on this calculator as well. And it works on both my calculators. All right, another example of the x being on the bottom of the fraction bar. Angle, hypo, is easy to identify. This is opposite and it's blank. That means this is the adjacent piece. Excuse me. Now look at your trig ratios. Adjacent and hypo is cosine. So I'm going to say the cosine of 43 equals adjacent must go on top of hypo. So there's your equation. I'm going to do my switcheroo to get 49.2. X comes over here. Cos 43 comes under here. So now I'm going to say x equals 36 over cos 43. Now you put that in your calculator, 36 divided by cosine of 43. And we're going to get 49.2. And there are my 4 examples of finding missing sides.